Next trade scenario is Paul George for Marques Johnson. For those listeners who are not familiar with Marques Johnson, let me just give a quick bio on Marques Johnson, and I'll give a quick one on Paul George. Marques Johnson, his rookie year was 1977 with the Milwaukee Bucks. He came from UCLA, and they won a title. He was insane. He was a great player. That's an understatement at UCLA. Obviously, I didn't see him play, but checking some of the highlights that I could find on him from back in the 70s, he was 6'8", and so this was a very intriguing trade scenario between him and Paul George, who's also 6'8". Paul George was drafted out of Fresno State by the Indiana Pacers. But back to Marques Johnson. Marques Johnson played with the Bucks until 1984 when he was traded in that blockbuster trade for Terry Cummings, Ricky Pierce, and Craig Hodges, previously mentioned by Jason. But during those years when Marques Johnson was with the Bucks, he averaged 27 and 3, 20 points, 7 boards, 3 assists. He coined the phrase point forward. So those of you that hear that term, you watch like a Paul George or like a LeBron. Think of LeBron. Brings the ball up, big guy, Scottie Pippen, same thing, where a big guy that was very versatile could bring the ball up, didn't have to play in the post all the time. And those Bucks teams were so close to a championship.
Very close, man.
They just ran
year in and year out, man.
Every year they either had the Sixers or the Celtics that they ran to. So either Dr. J's team with Moses Malone or Larry Bird and crew, where the Bucks just couldn't get over the hump and make it to the NBA Finals during those years when Marques Johnson was here in Milwaukee. As we look at this trading card scenario, the other key thing between these two I thought was cool. They both are from California. Paul George's numbers are 19, 6, and 3, currently with the LA Clippers. Looking at these cards, the 1978-79 Topps rookie card for Marques Johnson and the 2010-2011 Donruss rookie card for Paul George. I'm going to go with Marques Johnson in this scenario for the card. And the reason I say this is it's not worth as much as Paul George, but being a collector, those 70s cards are pretty cool, man. The impact Marques Johnson had on the game before he had his neck injury while he was with the Clippers. I would take Marques Johnson's rookie card over Paul George's rookie card in this trading scenario. How about you, Jason?
Look here, man. So I want the fans to go out to YouTube and really look at the Marques Johnson highlights back in the UCLA days and when he was with the Milwaukee Bucks. You will see what we're talking about point forward, just like Danny provided the information about Marques Johnson bringing the ball up. So yes, I agree with you about the coining of the term there of point forward. I'll say this, Paul George, I think one edge that Paul George may have over Marques Johnson is on the defensive side. Now we talk about the two-way players. Back then it was just basketball player. Yes. You got to play basketball on both sides. It wasn't nothing about no two-way player. So I don't know where really that started, but nonetheless, I think that's something that Paul George has over Marques Johnson. But as I looked at the highlights, man, of what Marques Johnson did at UCLA, you're talking about not only NCAA champion, but he was also player of the year. Again, I always look at rookie cards as can they meet the expectation of them translating from the college game to the NBA game? How do they go about transitioning and translating to the various games there? So Paul George, very nice player, man. I've seen Paul George up close, and I'll just say this, with the way things went down in Indiana with the team, because you all have to remember the Indiana Pacers played the Miami Heat several times in the playoffs. Yes. This is the LeBron team with D Wade and Chris Bosh, and several times the Pacers were right there. This is with Lance Stevenson, Roy Hibbert, that team, and the Pacers are always right there. And I remember the first time they played, that was when really Paul George really emerged as, he could be a superstar, not just a star, but a superstar. You remember when he dunked on LeBron? Yes. And he yelled at him? I mean, come on now. And everybody was like, wait a second now. Are we seeing a superstar in the midst in Indiana? So I have to say, man, seeing Paul George up close, but I would say this, man, the way that the locker room was and all that's really allegedly, I don't know what went down behind the scenes. There's a whole lot of rumors on the street. I would say that all allegedly. Paul George also had a gruesome injury, a gruesome leg injury.
Oh, yes.
When he played with the U.S. Olympic team.
Mm-hmm.
For him to, really make that comeback the way that he did and really just be an integral part. And then he ultimately obviously wanted to got traded to OKC. That full year that he was there at OKC, averaged 28 a game for OKC. Now, granted, it was just him and Russell. He did his thing, averaging 28 a game. I think he needed that to kind of elevate him a little bit. Because to me, when Paul George played the Miami Heat with D Wade and LeBron, when I just mentioned when he dunked on everybody, that's when everybody was expecting him to become that superstar.
Yes.
But he never became that superstar. And I don't think it was because of him getting injured. I think it's because it was just felt like he would always be like a number two. To me, he wouldn't be that one to be a number one. And why am I saying all this in terms of comparing to Marques Johnson? Because to me, Marques Johnson was a trendsetter. He was a difference maker.
Mm-hmm.
The point forward. We hadn't seen anything like that. We've seen a Paul George before. We hadn't seen no Marques Johnson before. And so with that, I'm going with Marques Johnson.